Thank you very much, Harriet. Also, maybe you could start by sharing quickly in the chat who you are. Maybe you self-define or self-identify as a parent, an educator, a social entrepreneur, a founder, a young person, whatever. Let us know who you are, just so we get a sense, a pulse of who's in the room. And also, please do share your expectations from the session, so maybe we can adapt the conversation and the flow of the session that we've prepared. So how will the session run today? 4 main steps. I'll start by sharing a few words as an introduction to frame that conversation a bit, and then Jen and Emir will share their understanding of the problem that we are facing when it comes to our learning ecosystems and the need to rethink, to revamp them. Then Jen and Emir again will describe the solution that they are bringing to the table to solve that problem. And then we'll start a conversation with the audience. Hopefully we'll have 20-25 minutes for that conversation. So that should be a pretty significant time. So hopefully that sounds good to everyone. Do share your thoughts in the chat if you have other expectations than this. And let me start by sharing a few words on today's topic to kick us off. I was just sharing with Jen that I became a father for the second time, and I feel that this multiplies my sensitivity to today's topic. My little girl Gabrielle, who just turned 4 months old, has actually now spent half of her entire life under lockdown without any contact with the external world, even with her family, except from her mother and I. So what we adults call a crisis for Gabrielle and for many other children and kids across the globe has already become their new normality. And it seems that this also becomes for every one of us a new normal. I saw last week a World Health Organization top executive, Mike Ryan, make the following statement, and I'm going to quote that statement. This virus just may become another endemic virus in our communities, and this virus may never go away. I think it is important that we're realistic. I don't think anyone can predict when or if this disease will disappear. So it looks to me like we're not entering a post-COVID world in the coming weeks or months, but we are actually entering a with COVID world, meaning that we might need to learn to live with COVID-19 and much likely probably with many other known and unknown consequences of human activity in the years and decades to come. So can there be a back to the past, as stated in the title of that session, when it comes to our learning ecosystems? My gut feeling is a strong no back to the past in a with COVID world. Gabrielle and millions of others of kids and children definitely will not learn as I learned, as we learned when we were young. So the notion of success, I think, is probably the notion that most needs to be redefined here, redefining what it means to be successful as a teacher, as a parent, as an educator, as an institution maybe, and of course ultimately as a young person. Another quote that I liked in the past I heard it a few months ago from Greta Thunberg, I think puts the challenge in a very powerful way. She says, why should I be studying for a future that soon may be no more, when no one is doing anything to save that future? So my sense is that the current dominant paradigm idea of success is not about saving our children's future, but rather defining success mostly by academic attainment and diplomas and by later on economic success. So what if we change that? What if the success of our learning ecosystem were all about empowering younger generations to actually build the future that they want to live in? So that being said, probably redefining success implies a deep transformation of our own mindsets, of the way we look at the world, of the way we relate to other human beings and to other living beings. And under that angle of mindset changing, transforming our learning ecosystems sounds kind of hard to achieve, even a bit unrealistic somehow. And what I tend to think, though, especially with that crisis over the past few months, is that it's increasingly even more unrealistic to think that we can actually thrive as a living species without deeply transforming our learning ecosystems. And this is where the social entrepreneurs like Jen, Emir, and many others across the planet give me hope, because they are not stopped by the size of the challenge. Of course, social entrepreneurs won't solve all of it by themselves, but they are not paralyzed by the challenge. They're connected to their inner power as change makers. They're already trying hard. They're empowering others to contribute. They're changing mindsets at scale, and their systemic approach might well end up significantly contributing to change. Let me end there by sharing a few poetic words from Arthur Ward that I feel illustrate well how social entrepreneurs approach that seemingly impossible task of changing the world big time. So it goes like this. It says, "It's impossible," says pride. "It's risky," says experience. "It's pointless," says reason. "Give it a try," whispers the heart. So I'll leave you with these words and invite now Jen and Emir to share a few words to help us better frame the problem that we're tackling when we talk about transforming learning ecosystems. And I suggest that totally randomly, Jen, you can start by sharing your thoughts on this.
Thanks, Thomas, and thanks for that really lovely introduction and that last quote, which really hit me. Actually, it does feel like that an awful lot of the time. Hello everyone. My name's Jen Lexman, and I'm the founder of EasyPeasy. I'm going to tell you more about EasyPeasy later on in the conversation, but Thomas has asked us to start by sharing some thoughts on how we are understanding the problem or the challenge at the moment. So for me, I would start by letting you guys know about the problem that I saw that inspired me to set up EasyPeasy in the first place. There's a really interesting continuity with what's going on right now. So I used to be a policy researcher before I became a tech entrepreneur. So quite the pivot. And as a policy researcher, I worked on social mobility, and my job was to understand where inequalities stem from and look at policy approaches that we could use to try and mitigate that, try and narrow inequalities. My research really took me into the early years and the home as these kind of primary environments where inequality starts to grow. 85% of a child's brain has developed before they set foot in school, and the biggest influence on that child's development in those early years are their parents and the type of environment that they have at home. So the level of stimulation and positive interaction between a parent and their child, that's really what sets the foundation for outcomes way on into across middle childhood, even into adulthood. The foundations of language, communication, social and emotional skills, physical development. As I was sort of studying all this, development at age 5 is highly predictive of what's happening way on into the future. And the gaps open up very, very early. The gap between a rich child with a stimulating, positive environment versus a disadvantaged child without that is very clear when they are 5 and start at school. And then that gap sort of does this throughout the school years. So when I'll tell you more about what we've done with EasyPeasy, but I think what's happened with coronavirus is really with the schools closing and childcare centers closing, and even when lockdown does lift, knowing that what we're going to be able to provide in schools and childcare centers is going to be very limited, it's really shifted a focus onto the home and the parents as the primary person in that child's learning and development. Now, what I find interesting and ironic is that that's kind of always been the case, particularly in the earlier years. But so when I see what's going on with coronavirus, for us, it's an opportunity, I think, to take what we've known from the evidence base and actually achieve that cultural change and that systemic change to really recognize the home for what it is as a learning and development environment, and recognize parents as kind of key figures in that, and do more to support them. So I think there's an opportunity. I also think there's many challenges to getting there, and looking forward to getting into that later on in the conversation.
Thank you very much, Jen. Emir, would you like to share your perspective on the problem we're facing here?
Yes, thank you, Thomas and Jen, for your interesting words. I'm Emir from Designathon, and thinking about the problems we're facing, it's broader than education. It's, to me, it's the way we see childhood, the way we see the role of the child in our societies, that we don't give them agency. And with agency, I mean being co-determinants of their lives and our world. Because traditionally, and it has changed as a social construct through history, how we see childhood and how we frame it. But currently, we see the child as someone who doesn't know anything of interest, maybe doesn't care, only thinks about toys or playing. So a human becoming, as opposed to somebody who's already there, has concerns, has a voice, has creative ideas. So I really want the world to emancipate childhood, to radically rethink how we see the child and the stages of life before adulthood, and give them a chance to practice with their creativity, their empathy, their engagement, so that they can learn how to contribute, and also be listened to now as young people. We've worked with 5-year-olds who have pinpointed the core problem of an issue, and come up with interesting solutions. And they don't have to have all the answers, but they need to be a stakeholder in designing our world together.
Thank you very much, Emir. Now my invitation is for you two, Jen and Emir, to take 5 minutes to deep dive into the solutions that you're bringing to the table with EasyPeasy and with Designathon. And then Henriette will help us maybe take 1 or 2 questions from the audience that you hopefully can answer. Jen, would you like to start by taking maybe 4 or 5 minutes to pitch what you're doing with EasyPeasy more in details?
Yeah, sure. What I'll do is first give you guys an overview of what EasyPeasy is, and then I'll talk a little bit about the way that we are responding to coronavirus specifically. So EasyPeasy is an app for parents with young children, and it allows them to discover, play, create, and share activities to support their child's development. And the way the app works is that it helps parents kind of transform what can be challenging moments in their day and find the way of turning those into playful opportunities. So that could be bedtime, bath time, mealtime, afternoon slump. We're trying to help parents go from challenging moments that are kind of barriers for them, and look at how they might kind of turn it on its head and introduce a more playful approach to getting through that, and actually, in fact, have some developmental benefit coming out the other end. We, as I said, my background in policy and research, we have taken always a very evidence-based approach to the development of EasyPeasy. So all of the activities and ideas on the platform, they all align to a internationally recognized framework for child development called Ages and Stages. And one of the things we're working on at the moment is a kind of responsive algorithm in the app, so that it actually helps the parent and child with kind of recommended content that supports that child where they are in their development, as well as speaks to the parents' needs and the struggles that they're facing at that time as well. We have worked with academic partners to test if this is having an impact. As you know, my mission, or our mission at EasyPeasy, is narrowing that gap in development. So we're really interested in whether we're able to really boost children's language, social and emotional skills, and physical development, so that kids are reaching a good level of development by the time they reach school. So we've worked with an independent team at the University of Oxford a couple of years ago. They've run a couple of studies on the platform, and have found that after sort of 8 to 10 weeks of playing with the app at home, that children are actually seeing these improvements in cognitive development, and parents also seeing improvements in their confidence and their ability to set and stick to routines within the home. So that kind of evidence piece was, I think, the kind of core part for me in validating this idea that we had created with EasyPeasy. And then at that point, once we established that, the goal of the organization moved to scaling, to actually getting this out there to as many people as possible, with a focus on disadvantaged families. So over the past couple of years, we have embarked on that scaling mission, and we've now supported around 60,000 families, largely drawn from disadvantaged communities across the UK. We've done that through partnerships with foundations and with local and central government. And that's kind of subsidized and allowed us to get this app out there to those families and target the families that we really want to help. But as coronavirus has hit, and as our scaling and kind of mission continues, we are really thinking about what we can do to sort of accelerate that. So I said we've worked with about 60,000 families. There's actually about 2.4 million families with children from 0 to 4 in the UK alone. And we're interested in a larger family. We're here as a global summit, a European summit, and a global summit too. There's about 18 million families across Europe and North America with kids from 0 to 5, and globally it's something like 270 million. So the scaling project, we're really only at the very, very beginning of that. What we have done, we used to only distribute EasyPeasy through these government partnerships, but what we've done over the past 6 months or so is open up the platform to across the whole globe. It used to be UK only, and also opened it up to parents specifically, so that it's not just that through a government program a parent would be able to access this. It's any parent anywhere who would be able to go to our website and sign up. What we really want to do to scale more quickly is really turn up the dial on that direct to parent model. We want to continue working with government, but it's challenging to move quickly and to kind of make these contracts. So our new approach is to introduce what we're calling the +1 model. And this is where for every affluent family who downloads EasyPeasy and subscribes, we're going to get access out to a disadvantaged family through our public partnership networks for free. And it's through that sort of consumer model that we really hope to be able to scale up much, much more quickly. And part of that is capitalizing on what we think is going to hopefully be a more kindness and compassion-based type of consumer behaviors that we hope to see and think we are already seeing as a result of COVID-19, as well as an increase in demand by families in general who are under a lot of pressure, under lockdown, under different childcare arrangements, and really are looking for more support at home. So there's a lot that we need help with to make it all happen. So a bunch of what I've described there is not yet live, although we have already raised a lot of support through Ashoka and other foundations to get us going. And we're hoping to go public with the +1 pledge in July. Yes, I look forward to kind of getting into more of the detail of that through the conversation and inviting conversations with those of you in the audience who might want to collaborate with us. But I'll pass back to Thomas now and hear from Emir about what the great stuff that she's doing as well.
Thank you very much, Jen. Just before we switch to you, Emir, I'm turning to Hayat here. Is there any question from the audience that you'd like to throw at Jen? And I'm not sure how this should be working, by the way.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, it always takes a couple of seconds for me to jump on the stage. The way is quite long. So yes, we have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. So there's one question Yolanda is asking, what are your business models actually for both initiatives?
Yeah, so as I was saying, we work very closely with local and central governments, and the 60,000 families that I've described, those families have almost entirely been reached through partnership agreements at the local and central government level in the UK, where they are essentially subsidizing us to distribute EasyPeasy to disadvantaged families. We work with primary schools, nurseries, and children's centres in the UK who sign up to get an EasyPeasy. They sign up and have their own EasyPeasy dashboard, and from there they're able to register target parents from their community by adding their phone number to our system or sending out a code through any of their communications channels. And if a parent either clicks on that code or receives a text message, it's an invitation, and they're able to accept that invitation and then enter into a local EasyPeasy pod. So that's the way that we distribute, and it's really important because it's through working with those teachers and local and central government experts and professionals that we are able to really target the families who they know or who they've identified as really wanting to support. So that's a kind of core part of the model. And just to be very clear, it's absolutely free for the parents who are being invited. The model that I'm outlining and the notion of the +1 is an idea to augment that work that we're already doing, to open EasyPeasy up to all parents, to a wider group of parents, and invite them not only to subscribe to EasyPeasy for themselves and their families, but through doing that, help us to get access to more disadvantaged families. So we were inspired by, I don't know if those of you who are aware of Tom's Shoes that do a 1-for-1 model, and it's that kind of idea that we're exploring with this. In our kind of in our research for this, we do feel that we will be able to scale and expand our kind of ambition more quickly by combining these two approaches. And I should add that a good chunk of what we do in a final business model, not really business model, but funding model, comes through the support of foundations. Like Lego Foundation is our latest supporter, and many other foundations who help us with bespoke projects as well.
Thank you very much, Jen. I'm conscious of time here to make sure that we have time for conversation with the audience later on. Maybe Emir, just before answering the question around your funding model, business model, I would suggest that we now jump into the details of what Designathon is about. Maybe you can take 3-5 minutes to pitch the idea, and then again answer that question around a funding business model and maybe one other question, and then we'll jump into a conversation. So over to you, Emir.
Sure, thank you. So what we do at Designathon is empower children to design a better world themselves. And maybe to take a little step back, prior to this social enterprise, which I co-founded, I was working in East Africa with young adults, disadvantaged, helping on employment potential, and seeing how much they were engaged and willing to contribute, and seeing how much of that energy was dissipating or not being harvested. I really saw the need to take the work to the younger generation. So we work with 7 to 12-year-olds, where you still believe in your own potential and the huge range of possibilities, and you're learning formative skills for the rest of your life. So how the methodology that we use actually works, it's based on design thinking and maker education. So in it, they're design hackathons, basically. The children invent, build, and present their solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. So they work on big world themes, such as clean access to water for everybody, climate change, also social topics such as poverty in cities. And to the surprise of their teachers, their parents, the adults who come to listen to them, they have useful insights, they understand the problems, and they want to contribute. And maybe talking to some of the things being said in the chat, a lot of people are wondering about, as they should be, children who are disadvantaged in the world, or specifically at this point. Yeah, from my work in the past, having worked with a lot of disadvantaged children, I actually really wanted to create a universal methodology because all children have these capabilities. So we did 3 years of testing to make sure that how we were framing questions, how we were presenting information, how we were eliciting and inviting children to participate, that was really inclusive. And we've done this with children in slum areas in Nairobi, with highly gifted children in Singapore, every type of mix. We've worked with autistic children, and every child has something to say. Every child has something that they care about. So usually we would be working in schools now, running programs, running challenges, often national events where children all over the country are invited to tackle a certain problem, such as plastic waste, and then culminating in a final live event. So obviously not doing that kind of thing at the moment. We were thrown by the crisis like everybody else was, and have since reinvented to take the opportunity, as Jen said, of the new focus on the home as the center of learning, which it also of course is. We're offering our program online. We've zoomed in on the corona life and the challenges it brings. Invite children to our online workshops to do it themselves. Teachers can offer it to their classrooms, either live themselves or live on Zoom, etc. And we've been getting amazing responses from children, and it's been translated to Turkish, Spanish, and just yesterday to Kiswahili. And like Jen, we collaborate with partners all over the world who are interested in this way of working with children and translate it to their language and offer it through their networks. I should probably tell you a few things children come up with to give you a sense. So say a group of boys in Nairobi, they wanted to invent a traffic light that would help tackle drunken driving on the roads there. Some girls in India created both a plastic net and a campaign, a net and a campaign to prevent plastic pollution going into rivers in their area. Some children in Amsterdam were working on food waste, so people throwing away food, apparently is 30% of what we buy, and giving that, repurposing it or sharing it with poorer communities in the same city. And with Corona, of course, they've been coming up with how to survive lockdown, how to connect with their family members, manage stress at home. They deal with the same topics that we do, and they have brilliant and mediocre and less useful ideas. So I always say children are just like people.
Thank you very much, Emir. I see Henriette, you've connected in advance this time. Is there one or two questions maybe that we can take from the audience about Designathon?
Oh yeah, you wanted the business model. We have a combination of foundations who support some of our kind of central efforts to develop the lesson materials and now the platform online. We're just starting with a pay as you like, or pay for one child and pay for another child in disadvantaged circumstances to both partake. We also get commissioned by companies or institutes who want to put a specific theme on the agenda and for children to interact with it in this way, such as climate issues a lot. But also the city of Rotterdam, for example, commissioned us to get children's ideas on poverty issues in the city.
Thank you, Emir. So I suggest now is the time for us to start a conversation. You can continue to share the questions that you have in the chat. Henriette is picking some of them and we'll invite the authors on stage so they can ask their questions directly. I've seen some of these questions appearing in the chat, and Henriette inviting you to join in. Maybe let me just kick us off by asking the first question, and then over to you, Henriette, for that question. And Jen, Emir, whomever wants to pick that first question goes. My first question would be, what would you say are the major forces playing against your intended system change? What is actually impeding it from advancing, from succeeding at the moment?
Or why don't you go ahead, since I've led the other two times.
Unfortunately, it's quite big, and don't get me wrong, the amount of amazing educators and schools out there working in oftentimes incredibly difficult circumstances who put their life and soul into helping children in their classrooms is they all deserve a Nobel Prize. And at the same time, I do think a huge barrier is what I was trying to describe at the beginning, the way we see children. If you don't see them as somebody who can partake, contribute, and you never ask the question, it never happens and you never see it. And it just is like this parallel universe that never comes to fruition. So it's mindset. It's starting seeing children as someone who have a valid contribution and asking them questions and listening to their answers.
Thank you, Emir. Jen, do you want to react, or should we move to questions? Yeah.
Well, I'll have a stab. I mean, I think that for us, the ongoing challenge is one of, I think it's recognition, and then it's structural systems. So, you know, I've already talked about the home learning, the home environment as a sort of primary space for learning, we know that it has an even bigger impact on early development than being in full-time nursery care, which is not surprising when you just think about the number of hours that a child typically spends at home versus in a center. It's clear that it's this huge influence, but I think there's a systemic barrier in recognizing that and figuring out how, as a society, do we support the home environment. It's not a typical space where a government would usually intervene. Parents are not a set of professionals. They can be professionals, but not as parents. So how do we support parents in ways that fit in with their lives? I think that's been a huge systemic issue, and one that led me to look at the power of digital and human-centered design to try and build solutions that really fit into parents' lives. As we know, and we hear so many stories under lockdown, parents are under such pressure trying to manage jobs and home life. And I think the pressure on parents gets greater the more disadvantaged that family is. So relationship pressures, financial pressures, mental health pressure, all of that kind of compounding on families who are already in the tightest spots. So yes, finding ways to reach those families and get help to them is a big barrier. And I really truly believe that we have to work in partnership in order to solve the problem. I think there's a role for government, there's a role for educators and teachers. You know, I didn't have time to get onto this, but one of the other things that we're doing is working with many like early years providers, be they charities or nurseries or even brands, and helping them get programs that they usually would deliver face-to-face, digitizing some of that content and getting it onto EasyPeasy's app. So finding ways to work with the ecosystem to start supporting the home environment where it is. And I think there's a real beauty in using phones to do that, because you can sort of reach in a way that kind of allows that parent to receive support without feeling kind of isolated. But yeah, a role for government, a role for partners, a role for design and technology, and a role for foundations. I think it's a huge orchestration though, and it's a big challenge.
Thank you, Jen. So new rules for every player in the ecosystem, basically. Henriette, I think we now have nearly 20 minutes for a conversation with the audience. Would you like to jump in now?
Yes, I'm happy to. So most of people for now prefer that I ask the question, which is completely fine. We have one person, Haluk. Please apply for audio and video. It is the blue button on the top right of this video panel in order to speak. And in the meantime, I'll just go ahead and ask a couple of questions for you guys. So Rajat asked in the very beginning of this session, the crisis has given us kind of a slap to the so-called high human race. How can we transform the systems now and root firmness in the new generation in order to link the things we do with the right things to do? Just go ahead, Jen or Emir, whatever comes to your mind.
Again, because I don't know if I understood the question.
I think he wants to know like how can we change something in the mindset of the new generations, in the way we do things, in the way we build up society, like the real big picture. Since now we understood, wow, you know, the way we did things doesn't work out, and we are facing this crisis now.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a really, I saw or heard on a news podcast that I listened to, the Daily from the New York Times. Obama was doing a high school like speech, commemoration speech that was live streamed to lots of kids, and they played a short clip of it, and he was sort of telling these kids, like, you know, what you see in coronavirus is that the people, even a lot of the people right at the very top, don't know what they're doing, that they don't have all the answers. And he said a lot of the time they don't even know how to ask the right questions. And he was telling these young people, you know, this is your chance. This is your way of understanding that if we're gonna come up with solutions, you are just as well placed as anyone else. You know, don't think that because of the place that you come from or your background or you being young or poor or whatever it is, that you don't have a right to, that you couldn't be as good as the next person in like reframing the questions and in coming up with solutions. And I think, yeah, I hope that we can use this crisis as a way of inspiring and empowering young people to feel like they have a role, they have just as much right as anyone else, and may well have better solutions than the current folks in power. I'm sure, Emir, that you see a lot of that inspiration in the work that you do.
Yeah, no, great question, and one a lot of us are asking ourselves, and being part of this, for example, and all the amazing initiatives that are being undertaken by all kinds of groups is so encouraging, and is basically the society that we want to have, where people contribute, everyone a changemaker world, as Ashoka reminds us that we are. And you know, from my particular perspective, what I think is super interesting is, you know, very much related to the problem that I was talking about as to how we see children. It's our whole attitude towards learning, that like learning is something you do in a particular space or at a particular time. And you know, we're learning beings. Spend your whole life learning, reinventing yourself, taking a new direction, reconsider with new information something that you held to be true. And I think what the chaos that has been visited upon us and how much has changed, it's reminded a lot of people we can change. We can learn. We have to learn. And this is actually what life is. It's about banding together, being creative, finding new ways to do things. So yeah, holding on to that intention, that way of being, that's definitely the way forward. And yeah, this is our opportunity for all of us here today and in our communities to say, yeah, this is the way we want to do things. We want to create them together. We want to make good.
Thank you very much, Emir and Jen. I will bring Haluk on stage now and let him ask his question. As I said, the way is quite long, so it takes some time.
Okay, it's a question about being collective impact. I see in the chat.
Exactly, yeah. Well, while he is coming to us, there he is.
Here I am. Thanks so much. Actually, my question is this. I'm Haluk from Turkey, living in Athens, Greece. My question is this. If you want to be a part of a collective impact initiative in which you want to achieve more, and who would you partner with in such a collective impact initiative? And what would be the impact that you would desire to achieve through this collective impact initiative? Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I mean, we couldn't do, we're already working with a lot of other groups. I think that I could talk about Ashoka, but I feel that we're already here, so I don't need to describe the brilliant ways in which Ashoka supports collective impact. But some of the other groups that we're part of at EasyPeasy, ECDAN is Early Child Development Action Network, global UNICEF-led network for raising the profile of early years. And you know, through that group, we're aware of incredible initiatives right across the globe, people pulling together to bring early years up the policy agenda. I think I love the title of this conversation, because you know, a real holistic understanding of education and development would have early years much more on the agenda than it does, you know, formal education, usually starting at the point where that learning, that huge opportunity for learning is starting to kind of, that window is starting to close. So I think groups like ECDAN are absolutely huge. There's a campaign, a national campaign here in the UK, the 1001 Days campaign, which is doing a lot actually around recognizing the needs of babies and very young children as well, and pushing to get a minister at the top level of government who's responsible for the first 1,000 days. If you look at our government, usually the early years is kind of split up between like 5 different government departments. It's a bit in healthcare, in the health department, a bit the education department, a bit in social care, a bit about you know, work and pensions to the extent that it has to do with parental leave. It's just a total mess. There's no like full clear policy agenda to support the early years. And then I know there are other campaigns, and I saw a question in the chat around getting internet access and devices to children who are without that at home. And I think that's another huge and important campaign. And I can't be serious any longer because I'm seeing a unicorn.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. And I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the time, and I think as an answer for Haluk's question, this is enough for now. I brought Tim on stage, and here's another question that maybe Emir you can answer. Hi, Tim. You're.
Yeah, thank you, Henning. Sorry, I was surprised we were immediately on stage. So I one of the things I was trying to inspire my kids to sort of listen to this, using sort of a little bit of chocolate and sort of everything at my disposal. Tessa has been a trooper, and I was checking out the Corona Challenge on the Designathon website, and I was just thinking like, okay, how is it that I actually am able to get my kids to do this, right? And I'm wrestling with this intrinsic motivation versus like bribery, right? And thinking like, okay, maybe we can set this up as a project tomorrow as an alternative to homeschooling. And I'm just thinking about like, how is it that you all think about intrinsic motivation and cultivating that desire to change the world versus, you know, parents or teachers like putting pressure on them to do it? Because, you know, the chocolate is great, but it has diminishing returns. And so how do we like sustain that motivation in young people? So anyway, thank you.
Great question. And what's your daughter's name, Tim?
Kicked him out already.
Oh. I wanted to say hi. We can see his name, but it's a super, her name. It's a super question, intrinsic motivation. And the way we tackle it in our program, I'll try and get to the question of the homeschooling aspect of it, but the way we tackle it in our program is we do set a theme. So we say, okay, today we're going to discuss issues around poverty in the world. And we start the process off with a discussion with the children. So we share some facts about the problem, and we share some sub-problems within the area. So if you're talking about Corona, it's to do with missing people at the other who you're not allowed to see. If it's you're not able to go out and play, you're trying to learn, and school's not working, some people can't do their jobs and are losing their livelihoods. So there's different aspects of any problem. So we delineate some recognizable problems for the children, and then in the next step, children, in our live version of the program, they get together in a team that they self-choose, and then they decide which problem they want to tackle themselves. And we think that's a key part of the intrinsic motivation, the fact that they're saying, we think this is a problem. So it's not us as adults saying, hey, children, obesity is a problem, come up with a solution. We're saying to them, okay, there's the whole area of food and health. These are some of the problems we've identified. What would you like to work on? And why do you think that's important? And now they've connected to something that they think is a problem, so they want to work on it. And especially when you start listening to their ideas and say, okay, so you'd like to create a special device to help children look at what they eat. How might that work, and how would that help the child, or what are you seeing in your head? And then we're drawing out of them what's in their imagination and what they care about. And yeah, we find it to be very motivating. Yeah, identifying the problem they want to solve and listening to, how far out their ideas are, helping them to make it more concrete. So I hope that helps a little, Tim.
Thank you very much, Emir.
I'm sure it does. Thomas, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Henriette. Yes, I think we're coming to an end here. We have a few minutes left, and I know it can feel very frustrating to stop there in the middle of the conversation, especially as I see burning questions being shared into the chat that we haven't had time to address. Yet my invitation is to connect directly with Emir and Jen through the chat, and then through emails or phone or whatever. I'm sure Jen and Emir would be delighted to share their contacts. It's been an immense pleasure for me to have spent the last hour with you guys. Thank you, Emir. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Henriette, for helping, and thank you all for your active contributions to the session. Emir, Jen, my suggestion now is for you to close that session by sharing anything you'd like with the audience, maybe a call to action or a desperate ask for help, or anything you'd like to close the session with. And then my invitation for everyone is to go back to the main stage for the closing ceremony with Kailash. Emir, would you like to share?
Yes, and a shout out to Tessa for staying with all these adults talking. My call to action would be twofold. One, listen to the children in your environment, ask them really interesting questions, big problems, and see what they have to say. And secondly, we would love to work with some of you here today. I saw in the chat amazing initiatives, and we're always looking for partners to reach more children. So if you think the way we work is of interest to you, please reach out, and we can take it from there.
Thank you, Emir. Jen?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, my call to action is, well, I shared earlier on, we've reached 60,000, and we have, depending on which way you look at it, we either have 17.95 million or 269.95 million more people to reach. So yeah, I would just love to invite folks to reach out and help us spread the word. And equally, I don't have a great sense of exactly who's in the audience, but if anyone has a traditional program that they're looking to start sharing digitally, then also please get in touch to become a content partner of ours. As I said, this is something that we're doing with more and more organizations at the local and national level, from individual teachers and schools to groups like the Scouts and Lego as well. So if that's of interest, then also please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. So we're closing now. We can click on the leave button on the top right end of the video screens and join again in the main stage. Have a great day, everyone, and see you in the closing ceremony. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.